Welcome to my first Flames of War battle report. Today's battle is an early war matchup between French and German forces using lists from the new 4th edition Blitzkrieg book. Tom and I are big fans of the early war period for Flames of War and are really excited to dust off our collections and try out the new 4th edition lists. Let's take a look at the armies. For the French, I'm taking the S-35 Combat Squadron. This force is led by a single S-35 formation commander. I've got two S-35 combat platoons, each with 3 tanks. I've got a Hotchkiss H-35 combat platoon of 3 tanks, one with the 37 mil long 37 mil gun. I've got the Hotchkiss H-39 combat platoon with 4 tanks, again one with the long 37 mil gun. I have a recon armored car platoon of Panhard AMDs. I have a platoon of Fusiliers and a battery of 75 millimeter guns with the forward observer. Tom brought the German Motorized Rifle Company. This has a 2-stand formation command. He brought 2 motorized rifle platoons, each with 7 rifle MG teams, a 5-centimeter mortar, and an anti-tank rifle. He has a machine gun platoon. He has a 8-centimeter mortar platoon. He has the 75 millimeter infantry gun platoon and the PaK 36 anti-tank gun platoon. He has a battery of 105s, a platoon of 38T tanks, and a platoon of Panzerjäger 1 tank destroyers. Today's battle is set somewhere in northern France or Belgium in 1940. On the east side of the battlefield to the right, we've got some fields and a vineyard. The center is really dominated by a small farming village and a crossroads. And to the west, on the left end of the battlefield, we've got scattered woods, a small marshy area, and a small hill. We can see the German objective marker at the bottom of the screen on the road, and the French objective marker that corresponds to it is at the corner of the wheat field. Looking at the west end of the battlefield, we've got the German objective at the bottom of the screen in the center, out in the open, and the corresponding French objective is in the upper left-hand corner, the small shed building next to the woods. The scenario for today's battle is contact. At the bottom of the screen here, we can see the French deployment on the right with 2 platoons of S-35s with the formation commander. At the top right of the screen, we can see the German grenadiers have deployed around the objective marker with 75 mil infantry guns in support. On the other side of the farmhouse in the vineyard in the upper left-hand corner, there's a German heavy machine gun platoon. On the French left, we can see the French 75s just at the bottom of the screen have deployed in the center of the battlefield behind the fields. The objective marker on the extreme French left is open, and in the upper left-hand corner, we can see the grenadiers dug in the woods next to the objective marker, with the anti-tank guns and the mortars deployed behind them. You can also see in the center in the vineyard the German heavy machine guns again. The Germans have Panzerjäger 1s, 38Ts in reserve, and have the 105s in ambush, and the balance of the French army is in reserve. Okay, let's get this battle started. French turn 1 is pretty simple. The 75 mil artillery is going to bombard the grenadiers dug in around the objective. Unfortunately, they're not going to get any casualties out of that, but there will be a pin marker on the infantry, and the French tanks will charge heroically across the battlefield and unfortunately not be able to make it into contact with the Germans. Tom sprung his ambush of 105s right behind the German grenadiers on the French right, and things are about to get ugly. Meanwhile, the German mortars take out one of the French 75s. Tom adds some medium machine gun fire to the misery of the French 75s. They are now thoroughly pinned down. The ambushing howitzers were only able to bail out one of the French S-35 tanks, and they quickly remounted. And the French tanks continued to press the attack, moving up and firing their machine guns. They didn't get any casualties, but the Germans were pinned down. So the first platoon moves in for the assault, only to receive withering defensive fire. Two S-35 tanks are knocked out. The tank assault fails, and the surviving tank has to fall back. Due to the methodical rule, he's got to fall back his full terrain dash distance, which puts him well behind the rest of the French tanks. The second S-35 platoon charges in and survives the German defensive fire. This assault is much more effective, and two German stands are destroyed. The Germans fall back, and the French tanks consolidate into the field. The Germans are unable to rally their infantry or their infantry guns, but the 105s continue to punish the French tanks, knocking one out and bailing out a second. Back in the center, the German machine guns continue firing on the French 75s, knocking out a second gun. Well, I finally come to the realization that my plan was a disaster. I managed to remount one of the French S-35s, and the three surviving tanks began to move towards the village. Meanwhile, the French armored cars come on from reserve and dash up the road to the crossroads, and the French infantry come on the left and cover the exposed objective. The German mortars punish the newly arrived French infantry on the left objective, and the 105s get another S-35 kill. Turn 4 sees the French getting another unit from reserve, in this case the H-39 tank platoon, which comes on to the left of the French 75s and begins to fire at the German machine gun platoon. The 75s also fire a bombardment against the machine guns, and the two surviving S-35 tanks make it to the crossroads. The S-35s, one of which is the formation commander, moved at dash to the crossroads, but was unable to provide any fire support against the machine guns. Meanwhile, the armored cars dashed to the end of the road and milled about aimlessly. At this point in the battle, I really had no clear idea of what I wanted to do next, whether I wanted to continue to focus on the objective to the right, shift my attack to the left, or shift to a defensive position. I've become dangerously obsessed with eliminating these medium machine guns. After losing two stands, the German machine guns stubbornly held on to the position. The German infantry guns fired on what was left of the French 75 battery and took out yet another gun. While I was focused on the center of the battlefield, Tom began advancing the grenadiers on the French right. At the time, I didn't really understand what he was doing. The French turn 5 begins with the loss of the last 75 mil gun, but also with the arrival of the H-35 platoon from reserves. This tank platoon would come on in the center of the board behind the H-39s that were still focused entirely on the German machine gun platoon in the center of the board. In addition, the S-35 platoon would continue to fire on the medium machine guns, and the armored cars had returned to the village to also fire on the medium machine guns. German turn 5 sees Tom continue to advance the grenadiers on the French right. I slowly begin to realize that I have left the German objective on the right completely exposed, and that's what he's heading for. The Panzerjäger 1s also arrive from reserves this turn and come up behind the French armored cars. The Panzerjägers have an excellent gun with an AT-8, and they are more than a match for the French armored cars, going straight to firepower and killing 2 of them. It's turn 6, and I finally figured out the danger I'm in. Tom has been advancing on both flanks with his infantry for the last couple of turns. On the French left, he has also got a platoon of 38Ts that have come on from reserve in support. I finally shift the H-39 tank platoon towards the left in order to support the French infantry that has been under constant mortar bombardment. I shift the surviving armored cars down the road, but instead of engaging the imminent threat from the Panzerjäger 1s, I continue to focus on the German machine guns. The H-35 platoon stays in place, also continues to focus on the medium machine gun platoon. The S-35s shift down the road towards the open objective on the right. It's German turn 6, and the machine gun platoon continues to hold their position, though pinned down. They've really been a thorn in the side of the French forces. The Panzerjäger 1s are now moving into the village and getting ready to fire on the armored cars again. Their fire is not as effective as they had hoped, only bailing out 2 of the armored cars. Back on the French left, the German artillery and mortars have been punishing the dug-in French infantry. Meanwhile, the German grenadiers and 38Ts have been moving around the flank using the woods as cover. The action for turn 7 is focused on the duel between the Panhards and the Panzerjäger 1s in the village. The French were able to remount one of the armored cars and then reposition to fire on the Panzerjäger 1s. They were able to knock out one of the Panzerjägers and bail out a second. The Germans quickly remounted the bailed out tank destroyer and brought up another to fill the gap. Their return fire was devastating, destroying 2 of the French armored cars and bailing the third, effectively destroying the platoon. The French infantry have finally had enough of the constant artillery barrage and move off of the objective in the hopes that they will have to range in again. Meanwhile, the H-39s shift over in order to engage the German tanks on the French left. Back in the center, the French H-35 split their fire between the German medium machine guns and the approaching Panzerjäger 1s. On the French right, the S-35s cover the objective, and the formation commander takes out one of the German infantry guns. German turn 8 begins with the medium machine gun platoon finally failing their last stand and withdrawing. Back on the French left, the German 38Ts move into the woods while the grenadiers move out to engage the French infantry. The firing from the grenadiers is too effective and they no longer have assault range on the French. Back in the center, the Panzerjäger 1s knock out one of the H-35 tanks. On the French right, the German 105s fire a bombardment on the S-35 tanks, bailing out the French formation commander. French turn 9 starts with the infantry failing their last stand and fleeing the battlefield. The H-39 platoon will stay in place and fire on the Panzer 38Ts for no effect, and the Hotchkiss H-35 platoon on the road will begin to shift towards the French left objective. On German turn 9, the Grenadiers on the French left move to capture the objective. The 38Ts stay in the place in the woods and fire on the Hotchkiss H-39 platoon, knocking out 2 and bailing a 3rd. Back on the French right, the Panzerjäger 1s fire on the remaining S-35s, along with the German 105 artillery, bailing out both tanks. By turn 10, the French on the left were desperate. They only had 2 operational tanks, and only one of them was able to contest the objective, the other one being stuck behind the hedge. They fired on the German Grenadiers, but were unable to pin. The lone H-35 charged the Grenadiers, but were unable to cause any casualties. The Germans counterattacked and were unable to damage the tank. Eventually, the German Grenadiers would fail their motivation and would fall back from the objective. The French tank would then consolidate towards the other H-35. With German turn 10 starting, Tom moved the Grenadiers around the objective and back into contesting. The German 38Ts fired on the H-35 platoon and bailed out the closest tank. Back on the French right, the German Grenadiers moved into the field towards the French formation commander. The Panzerjäger 1s lined up a shot to try to eliminate the French tank. The Panzerjägers were only able to bail out the formation commander, but the Grenadiers were close enough to assault and destroy the bailed out tank. Well, it's turn 11, and quite honestly, this has been academic for the last couple turns, but the French are going to press on. They managed to remount the bailed out tank, and the 2 surviving Hotchkiss tanks advance on the German infantry and fire, managing to take out a stand, and then they launch their assault. The German defensive fire from the tanks bail out one of the Hotchkiss tanks. The surviving French tank fails to get any kills, and the German Grenadiers counterattack. The French tanks would fail their motivation and have to fall back, leaving the bailed out tank to be destroyed. Due to the methodical rule, the French tank fell back far enough that it was no longer contesting the objective, thereby handing the victory to the Germans. Well, that was a great game, and I was really excited to get those early war forces back on the table. I think Tom played an amazing game. He was very, very cautious, very methodical in his approach to the game. I think he got the maximum use out of all of his units. In the end, I think he only lost 2 platoons and only a few other stands. So he played a really fantastic game. I, on the other hand, played a rather disappointing game. I had a horrible initial plan. I should have known that trying to just charge like cavalry right into the German position wasn't going to end well, especially with the ambush of the heavy guns. And then to make matters worse, once that inevitably failed, I had no real plan B and spent most of the rest of the game kind of reacting and getting very focused on the center of the board where there was really not going to be any victory. I think the new Blitzkrieg book is very good. I like what they've done with the French and the Germans. I haven't looked too much at the British. I think for the French, particularly, French tank forces, they need to be played much more deliberately. I think using that French methodical concept where you treat the tanks almost a little bit more like you would treat an infantry force is really the way to go. You've got to keep concentration of forces. You've got to use your orders because your movement isn't very good. Can the French win in version 4? Well, I think they definitely can. I think the S-35 is probably the best tank so far for early war. I think you have to have good leadership, and unfortunately, I was very much like an early war French officer, uh, not very good, and I let down a very good force that could have been successful. Thanks to everybody who made it to the end of the video. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. If you have any comments or feedback, those are always welcome. And if you'd like to see more, maybe go ahead and click the subscribe. Thanks.